Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Steaks with Mates. I'm your host, Health Coach Joff, and today I'm joined with the lovely Bradley Marshall. Now, Bradley, thank you so much for coming along and joining this episode for this podcast. It's an absolute honor to have you on board. How are you
It's
doing?
my pleasure. I'm doing really well. Thanks for inviting me down to your podcast. It's a pleasure to be here.
For those who don't know, Bradley, you've been on social media for a few. I believe it's
It's
been a
been
few
about
years
two
now,
and a
hasn't
half
it?
years. Yeah.
Yeah, and in particular, your health journey and
Yeah.
opening up about what you went through and how you overcome the issues that plagued you for pretty much most of your life.
Most of my
And
life. Yeah.
yeah. And so, if you don't know Bradley's story, I highly suggest before you watch this podcast, go to Bradley's Instagram page and watch the first video that he's got pinned up because it is an amazing thing that you've achieved over, the last few years. Obviously, this channel is about the carnivore diet and about healing. So you guys can just go in and just watch that because it was, the first time I saw it, it was a big wow. That is crazy that you've overcome this. But I'll let you talk, man. Let you go through your story. So yeah, tell us about the sort of timeline where everything started in terms of your health.
Yeah. So I've always had eczema. It's something I was pretty much born with. Asking my parents, they said I had eczema around at least 3 months, anywhere between day 1 to 3 months. I already had eczema. So it was something I just had my whole life. And for the most part, it was pretty manageable by using steroids. So it wasn't always terrible. It would fluctuate between terrible and manageable. So it would always be there. I was always conscious of my skin. So I try to wear long sleeve shirts in high school and long pants and try to cover it all up because obviously appearance is something where usually most people are insecure about. So it was pretty manageable, but unfortunately, there's times where I had missed out on prom night and I missed out on year 12 camp and a lot of significant events just because my skin was so bad and flared up that I just couldn't attend and it wouldn't have been fun to attend. So it affected me quite drastically until when I was 23. That's when my body had enough. And I've been using steroids my whole life at this point and trying UV therapy and all of these different medicines, Western medicines. And my body just said, look, I can't take this anymore. I can't keep applying these synthetic cortisol drugs and these fake artificial synthetic crap on my skin forever. Eventually it broke out. So, long story short, I was just using heaps and heaps of steroids that were just increasing in potency until I got to the highest potency. And at that point, my body just had enough. And at that point, it's actually quite common for people to go through topical steroid withdrawal. So that's what I was going through, TSW. And my body was just exploding into all of this horrible rashes, which is what you'll see in that video. So it was like that when I was younger, but when I applied the steroids, it would be manageable. It would be able to control it. So I'd go into the doctors and the doctors would say, Bradley, your skin is a raging inferno right now, and we need to control this by applying steroids onto your body. And so usually when it broke out, I'd put on the steroids because you don't want to stay on steroids forever. You want to stay on it for a small amount of time because it actually makes your skin weaker. And it's because it's so strong, you just don't want to stay on it for too long. They say apply sparingly. So when it erupted into horrible eczema, I'd apply the steroids sparingly, and usually that would be okay, and then it would go away. But the problem is, eventually the steroids stopped working. So no matter how many times I applied the cream during this period from 23 to 26, it just wouldn't go down. And at that point, I had to elevate onto something stronger. So the doctors were suggesting I take Dupixent, which is an injection, which is at the time was about 5 years old in the UK, and it's just been introduced into Australia. So they were recommending this injection, which I'd take twice a month. And it was this miracle new drug, kind of like Ozempic for eczema. And it would clear up your skin. It would make everything great. I mean, it's not perfect. There's so much side effects, just like Ozempic. It causes conjunctivitis. which then you'll have to use steroids for your eyes and can cause corneal abrasion, even blindness, and facial flares, all of these problems like weight gain, easily burning in the sun. And I didn't have any facial flares at that point. So I was lucky in a sense because I never put steroids on my face. I always put Elidel, which is something else. It's not a steroid. So I never had the problem of having really bad eczema on my face like you see other people having, which is just shocking. And it's really unfortunate. But I just had it on my body because I put the steroids on my body. So it may, like, people sometimes don't even know how bad the eczema is or whether it's just a response to the steroids. Like, how bad is your eczema versus the reaction as a withdrawal from steroids? So you could see on my face there was no eczema at all. It was not much compared to my body because I never put steroids on my face. So at that point, I'm 23. I'm entering this period of just sheer, well, pain and suffering for 3 years because nothing was working and the doctors were suggesting Dupixent. But I really didn't want to go on Dupixent at that point because I was already so disillusioned by having steroids for 23 years. So I just decided to try and heal my gut naturally because I was hearing from all these different sources that healing the gut is the root cause. So that's the root issue. And if you heal that, you'll be able to heal everything. So I noticed when I fasted, I was healing, but obviously you can't fast forever. The other thing I noticed is, cold water therapy. So just bathing in the ocean was really helpful for me, saunas. And eventually I joined this like holistic gym where everyone was really practicing mindfulness and they were all recommending alternate diets. And the owner of the gym came up to me and said, I had eczema too, really bad, just like yours. I really think you should try the carnivore diet. So, it's amazing that it came from a gym owner and not a doctor.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
Having healed, I returned to the doctors and I showed them, look, I adopted a carnivore diet. This is why I'm healed now. And they still discredited it. They said, I still think you still have some small rashes on your neck. You can still benefit from taking Dupixent. So it's just insane the world we live in where the correct advice is found at the gym and the incorrect advice of just staying drug addicted for the rest of your life and paying commissions to doctors for prescriptions is the mainstream of just being a drug addict your whole life. So eventually, I found the carnivore diet through this guy at the gym. I went on it that day. So
Wow.
14 weeks later, I look like I am now. So
Wow.
if you see the transformation on my Instagram, you can see how bad it is. I mean, it's not always perfect. I mean, sometimes there's small flare-ups, like there's some on my lips a tiny bit, but compared to how it was, it's just 99% increase of just much better.
Wow. It is. Look, when you look at the photos online that you've posted, a lot of people think this has got to be photoshopped. But
Well, that's what people
I'm gonna
think.
I
They think I'm
know.
faking it
But
or I'm still on medication, but I'm not. I'm completely medicine free apart from natural food.
that is the beauty of this. We've got social media to show our stories, but people can relate. And I'm going to speak on a personal note because that's something that I have also suffered with, probably not to the same extent as you. I had eczema growing up, and just like you, waves. It would come in waves. Usually it's seasonal, but I also noticed for myself personally, stress was a huge factor. So to see you come out of that and use essentially natural remedies is something that I would highly recommend people to look at, because the steroids that I was using, I experienced the same thing. I had the withdrawals, and the doctors would always tell me, use it sparingly, but they never tell you how much to use. They always just tell you just a little bit, but you use a little bit, and then the next flare up, you'd want to use more because it did work for me personally. The topical steroids work up to a point where you're right. It's just it stopped working.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's just highly relatable, and I think um, it's a more common problem I see in people of Asian descent. I don't know. I'm from a
Mm.
Filipino background, so I've
As
seen
am
it a
I.
lot in. Yeah, yeah. So it's so common. I just think that this is something that I think people need to look at. So
Mm.
you transformed your life. You went carnivore, and for the first 2 weeks, years, did you see a rapid sort of change
Yeah, I
in?
saw a rapid change in 2 weeks. I could start to sleep, which was a massive like improvement because once you start
Mm,
sleeping, you can start healing. Because before
yeah,
that, I
yeah,
wasn't able to sleep much at all. I'd be lucky to sleep 1 hour, and I would just work out throughout the night. I'd just be lifting weights because that was better to lift weights than to scratch. So I would take out my angst and all of the itchiness by lifting weights. And then in the
yes,
morning, around when the sun finally came up, because what happens is cortisol decreases at night. So
hmm,
cortisol is what steroids basically are. You're using
yeah,
cortisol to reduce inflammation because cortisol helps fight inflammation. So
hmm,
at night, cortisol decreases, and so that's why it gets more itchy for a lot of eczema
yes.
patients at night. So that's why it was so difficult to sleep. But in the morning, when the cortisol would kind of elevate again, I'd feel less itchy, and so I'd just fill up the bath and I'd fall asleep in the bath.
Oh wow,
Yeah, and I'd be lucky to sleep for like a few hours, 1 hour to 2 hours. It was
yeah.
just, it was pretty horrible. So after the carnivore diet, I was resetting my gut. Ultimately, in 2 weeks, I was able to sleep, and from then, it just 14 weeks finished. I was completely healed.
And was that transition? How was it for you? Because I know a lot of people go through this phase of trying to not just adapt physically but mentally as well.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, I was. I think I was excited to try the diet, and I was happy to. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but I was reading Paul Saladino's book, and all my
ah,
fears were calmed, like all about my fears of dying of cancer or atherosclerosis. It was all calmed. So I was keen to get into this diet because I was seeing that it was working for Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson, and a bunch of other carnivores online. So I didn't really have any mental issues going through. I mean, obviously, I was still suffering. Even when I was
yeah.
healed, I talk about in some of my reels, I talk about the ghost pains I was still feeling. Like, for
Yeah.
example, my nerve endings were still like excited and agitated. And so I was still feeling a bit itchy, even though my skin had healed. It's kind of like amputees when their leg gets cut off, they still feel their leg.
Mm,
So I think my nervous system was still so used to being itchy that it took a while for the itchiness to subside. But today, I don't feel any itchiness whatsoever. I'm
mm,
like
mm,
I'm living a completely different life to how I lived prior to 2022. So 3 years ago, it's 2022 June. So it's about two and a half.
mm.
It's almost coming up to 3 years, and
Yeah.
I just live a completely different life. Like when
Yeah.
I look at
Yeah.
those photos when I was doing my speech for carnivore events, just like the one just
Yes.
passed,
Yeah.
I look at those. I look at the life I've lived, and it's just like I'm transported into a different lifetime
Mm,
because now
mm.
I've got my life back. I can, I'm not ashamed of my body. I can have any career path. I can find potential love, whatever. My whole life
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
reintroduced back to me, and it's opened up from how it was before, when I was just lying in bed, not sure if I'd be alive in the next 5 years.
Mm. Wow, that's very powerful. Um, and I know that a lot of people can relate with even with different issues. But your journey in carnivore has opened up a lot of doors, not just for yourself, but for other people.
Mm,
How's it like been since you've actually, before we get into social media, before
mm,
you decided to tell the world about this,
hmm
how did the people around you feel when you tried this, what sounded crazy before but not so now, this carnivore diet? What
Well,
did your
yeah.
say? Yeah.
I think the loudest voices were from vegans, like in different
Really?
ways,
Okay.
because they believed that, they believe that veganism is the way, and the way you heal is by
Yeah.
removing meat. And so, by
Yeah.
me posting on my stories that I was trying an all meat diet, they thought I was just in reverse. Like, my mind was
Oh yeah.
flipped. Like, why would you go on an all meat diet when it's all vegetables that heal you? Like, you're
Okay.
not. This is not going to work. Like, you're just going to get cancer and die of a heart attack. Like, this is not going to work at all. So I think I really surprised them when it did work. And so,
Yeah.
they say to me now, if it works, then I'm all for it. You're not doing this because you have any other choice. You don't really have any other choice, right? Like, you're doing it for health. So I can't really blame you for eating meat, even though I believe that sacrificing an animal, a sentient being, is immoral.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, I try to eat as much grass-fed beef as possible. Like, I
Yeah.
don't eat factory farmed beef because I don't want to support the factory farm industry. But also,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
also healthier beef. Like, all of that factory farmed beef is all
Absolutely.
fed antibiotics, and so
Yeah.
there's so much uh, talks online where they talk, and articles written about the reason why we have so much superbugs going around right now, like even like the pandemic just passed, is because all of the food is just fed antibiotics. And so the small bugs mutate and become larger bugs because they're so resistant to all the antibiotics constantly being fed to our cows, to our salmon. Like right now, there's a Tasmania salmon farm that's just riddled and with toxicity, and they're all just inundated with antibiotics, and it's just standard practice. So that's why it's not just to save the planet by not eating factory farmed. It's also the antibiotics.
Mm-mm. Absolutely. And it's such a the I guess the doors for people to actually look at what's happening in these industries is being opened up, and people are starting to see that, oh wow, actually we need to actually look at the quality of the foods we're eating.
Mm.
I mean, if you're not on the carnivore diet, you definitely have to look at the quality of your foods because of the insecticides and all the things that they're doing to the plants as well.
Mm.
So you know, um, yeah, I that's really funny that
Yeah.
you say the vegans attacked you. Did you have a lot of vegan friends or followers at the
Yeah, I
time
mean,
when you
I'm a
started?
musician,
Yeah,
so most of the musicians are very progressive.
yeah,
So they're all
yeah,
vegetarian, vegan. I mean, talking to just people online, they're like, or potential partners, whatever. They always say, I'm vegetarian. I'm like, oh, here we go. They're going to be
yeah,
turned off me. But
yeah,
just speaking on the factory farming thing, you know, it's I implore people to research regenerative agriculture or
yes,
holistic farmed meat, because fertilizer, like manure from the cow, is supposed to be an asset for the grass, but in these factory
yeah,
farms, the manure becomes so toxic with ammonia, and it's just a septic environment because they're separated from where they should be on the
mm,
land. They're just in this factory. They're inside walls, and so of
mm,
course it becomes pretty toxic pretty fast. I mean, if they're on land, then the grass has a symbiotic relationship with the cow, right? And so if you
yes,
separate the cows from the grass, the actual grass doesn't survive as well either. So all we need to do is return back to how nature intended, and there's no problem with methane and with
mm,
cows. The issue is
yeah,
because
yeah,
of this industrial age. And so
yeah,
people are blaming cows when really it's the method of farming cows which is to blame.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the meme where it's like we blame the cows for their farts, but you've
Mm.
got Taylor Swift's plane that goes around in America and sort of just goes everywhere. I mean, isn't it quite obvious that cows aren't the issue here? It's not the cow
Yeah,
farts. I mean, we've got so much going around, like so much industrialization of just everything in the world right now. That's a huge issue, but.
yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to the point with sourcing good cattle and beef and whatnot, it
Mm.
actually people think that it is inefficient It's costly. Um, you can't do it. But in my experience going carnivore, you absolutely can. And it's actually way more sustainable, way more cost effective. Just finding out where your local farm is and ordering
Mm.
straight from the source rather than the middleman. I think anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
Mm.
convenience. Just go to Woolworths and see what they have and then just buy. But like, yeah, it takes, I get all my eggs from a local farm
Yeah.
and I get it from a local butcher, which is a farm up in Gippsland, which is in Victoria. So
Yeah.
it does take more effort, but I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. So onto another topic. What does your diet look like right now? Or has it changed since you started carnivore? Sort of.
Yeah, it's been a journey. So I've had a pretty massive week this week, and I'll explain why. But
Mm,
first, I'll just say that at the start, it was the lion diet. So for the 14 weeks
yes.
of healing, I just wanted to reset my gut. So I decided all I'll eat is meat, salt, and water, which is what I survived on, and it worked. But then I was noticing electrolyte issues, as in heaps of cramping. And, you know, different carnivores say that could be rectified by eating more meat. That's what Professor Barquet says. You just eat more
Mm,
meat. That way you can induce gluconeogenesis, where glucose is
mhm,
created inside your body from protein. And that way, he says, you know, electrolytes are flushed from your body when you don't have these GI spikes. And so the GI spikes can be created by eating excess meat. That way, it's gluconeogenesis happening. Then you have glucose created. Then you don't have these GI spikes, and then the electrolytes aren't flushed out. So that's all well and good, but I was eating like 8 steaks a day sometimes, and I was
mm,
just so satiated, and I was still getting cramps. So I was wondering what maybe I wasn't drinking enough water potentially. Like other people say, you need to drink more water, and that will alleviate cramps. But for me at that point, I just started reintroducing coconuts and avocados because they're fruits that are found on the keto diet, and they're
mm.
low carb. So I was eating that, and then the cramps went away completely. So I noticed Paul Saladino after about a year. This is about I followed that for about a year. So at that point, I was Paul Saladino was the person who got me onto the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
So I noticed he was reincorporating heaps of fruits, and so you know, being Filipino, fruits are always prevalent in the Philippines 24/7 and around the whole year. So
Yeah.
I I had my genetic ancestry in mind, thinking that, you know, my Filipino ancestors would have fruit available to them 24/7. So perhaps maybe it's in my ancestry to be able to tolerate fruit. And for the most part, it was good. My skin was able to tolerate fruit, and I didn't think there was an issue. Last year, I got a blood test. So I've had blood tests every April. I just do it once a year. And so last year, I had a blood test, and it was mostly good. I had my triglycerides were about 1.1. I think they should be lower than zero point 0.5. So it wasn't
Hmm.
ideal, but and then my HDL was about 1.3, which is lower than 1.6. So it has to be
Mm,
higher than 1.6 to be ideal and lower than zero point 0.5 triglycerides to be ideal. But they said the ratio of triglycerides over HDL has to be lower than 1. So I spoke to Dr. Suresh, who is an influencer as well, called the Meat Medic, a
yes.
carnivore doctor. And he said he actually did my blood work on a podcast live. And he said that it was all good. There's really no issues here because the triglyceride to HDL is lower than 1. And even Paul Saladino says that his AST sometimes is high and ALT, which are markers of liver function. And he says sometimes they fluctuate and it's okay. So I thought everything was fine, and I didn't get my blood checked for another year until this month again. And so now my blood wasn't as good as it could be. So my triglycerides were 2.1, my HDL was 0. uh, my triglycerides is 2.1, so it should be lower than zero point 0.5, so really high.
Mm-mm.
And my HDL was around zero point 0.6, which is much lower than 1.3, so really low. And then if you do the ratio of triglycerides over HDL, which should be lower than 1, it came to 3.5, which is just really high. So I brought this up in the carnivore speech just a week ago, and
Mm-hmm.
someone in the front row said, "Doesn't that mean you have fatty liver?" And I said, "Well, yeah. It's not. It's not. I'm at risk of fatty liver. It hasn't been
Yeah.
diagnosed, but so far, which I was going to share with you, before we even started out, I was hinting at something that's exciting that I'm
Mm.
doing.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been fasting this whole time. So since I saw you, Joff, I haven't eaten anything.
Wait, that's been a week,
5 days. Well,
5 days. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's been 5 days. So my intention was to do a 5 day fast because that's what Dr. Kilch recommended when I was speaking to him. He regularly practices 5 day fasting at least 4 times a year just to cleanse his system and to cleanse his mind. It refreshes everything. It's like a control alt delete, and
Yeah.
it activates autophagy, which is called cellular
Yes.
cleansing. So
Yes.
when there's nothing to eat, your body starts to regenerate by eating itself. That's what autophagy means. Like,
Yes.
and so it's eating all that visceral fat, visceral as opposed to fat that is on the surface that you can see, like a beer gut. The visceral fat is the fat that's surrounding my organs, like the pancreas and the liver. And so I haven't done my blood work yet, but I feel a lot better because I was actually feeling quite exhausted before eating a lot of
Yes.
fruit, and I wasn't sure why. I really wasn't. I didn't correlate the two. I didn't put two and two together and realize it was actually the fruit causing it. But I actually feel a lot more alert, but you usually do when you're fasting. I mean, I've noticed I've lost a lot of weight. I mean, my parents have even said to me I look quite gaunt. So if I look different, that's why I haven't eaten for the last 5 days. And I'm on the final stretch, so I'll be eating tonight around 9 p.m. And I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to just dig into a steak. And so to answer your question of how my diet's changed, at the moment, I'm I'm definitely cutting out honey. Well, it's hard to know exactly what to do. So I think for now I'm going to just return to steaks, eggs, and fish and most animal based foods. I mean, I haven't tried butter since I started the carnivore diet 3 years ago. I mean, butter is something that never used to really agree with me in the first place. So, but I'm keen to try, if I could find something that's more organic or even raw milk made butter, possibly. But so I'm willing to try more things on the carnivore diet because, it's very restrictive as is, let alone cutting butter out and cheese and dairy. So that's why I wanted to incorporate fruit because it was macros that I wasn't getting from fat in the carnivore diet alone. And there's protein poisoning is a thing if you're not getting enough
Mm.
fat. And I work out 4 times a week for like 8 hours cumulative. So I was feeling kind of weak. That's why I like to have sometimes a spoonful of honey. But the fact is, I was just eating way too much. Like I was eating much more than 200 grams that Paul Saladino recommends. He recommends 200 grams a day. And so the combination of sugar plus meat is a problem because
Mm.
Professor Barkay talks about the Randall cycle. And so if you eat fat, your energy source is fat. So if you have excess fat, then all the glucose doesn't need to be
Yeah.
inside the cell anymore because your cell is replete. It's filled up with fat. So all of that sugar is blockaded. The cell says, look, I don't want any more. I don't want any more. I've got enough in terms of fat. I'm going to blockade all this sugar. And so all that sugar just floats around your arteries. And that's where they glycate with the LDL.
Glycate.
So the LDL is
Mm.
is usually what's vilified for causing heart disease, but it's actually the fact of sugar glycating it and damaging it that
Mm.
causes small dense LDL, which then causes atherosclerosis and heart disease. So
Mm.
it's clear, but the thing is, which is confusing, is this confusing science because they say that the glucose inside fruit is wrapped up in the fiber, and so
Mm.
the glucose and the fructose is actually released slowly because it's not a
Mm.
high GI spike like drinking a Coke, which is
Mm.
pure, corn, high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah.
It's wrapped up in the fruit, which means it's released slowly, which means you don't have a high GI spike. So, and other articles say that up to 95% is just digested and only the 5% goes into the bloodstream. So I think what the problem was clearly was I was eating way too much. I was eating past 200 grams. I was just having spoonfuls of honey all the time for energy.
Mm.
I was cooking steaks, and afterwards I'd just cook bananas on after, like as a dessert on the meat fat, which on the pan that I was eating the steak on, I
Yeah.
would cook the
Yeah.
bananas on after, and I'd have about 5, 6 bananas. So for reference, 200 grams is about 4 bananas, and that's it. That's the
Mm.
quota for the day. So I was having like sometimes
Yeah.
6 to 8 bananas, double the amount I should have, and it was
Mm.
just too much. So clearly, at the moment, I'm thinking of going back to carnivore completely, because even carnivores, they recommend up to 30 grams of
Mm.
carbohydrates is okay. I mean, animal based, which is Paul Saladino, he recommends 200 grams, but for me, I was just way
Mm.
too much. I was past like 400 grams or even more. Like sometimes I was just binge eating fruit, thinking it wasn't going to affect me. But so at the moment, I'm thinking of returning to a carnivore diet, but I won't cut out fruit completely. I mean, like even Dr. Kiltz surprised me on the weekend when he said, sometimes I have a cake. And it's just like, you can have it occasionally, just not all the time. So I'm not going to be like Dr. Anthony Shafee is very strict on his diet. He doesn't have anything. And, that's
Mm.
noble. Professor Barkay sometimes has berries, he says. He has 30 grams of fruit. So I'm not willing to cut it out completely because it's not affecting my skin. I mean, if it did affect my skin and I flared up, I wouldn't eat it at all. But because it's my liver, I mean, liver is very important. But if I can maintain an AST level and an ALT, like which are liver markers,
Yep.
if I can
Marcus.
maintain a healthy liver, then I don't see an issue with cutting out fruit. If I have a small amount of fruit and it doesn't affect my liver, then I think that's okay. But if it's in moderation, it's okay. The problem with me, I was just eating way too much.
Wow.
Yeah.
First off, I want to go back to your fasting because that you're the second person who's done it. I don't know what it is about my podcast, but everyone who comes in says they're doing a 5-day fast. Like, well,
Yeah, I
what?
don't know what's so special about the 5 days. Before I only did a three
Yeah.
day fast, so now I'm doing the five
Yeah.
days.
Well, first off, well done. That is.
Thank you.
I know it is a difficult thing to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is challenging, but I'm sure that you are going to reap the benefits of autophagy. I think if you haven't tried doing a prolonged fast, um, look into it. Of course, educate yourself, but actually do it and
Mm,
experience. You
mm.
know how amazing you feel. So first off, that is amazing. Way
Yeah.
more than I can do for sure.
It
Um,
certainly really makes you appreciate food. I mean,
yeah.
I think communally, in religions in the past and even today, they practice fasting as part of Ramadan,
Yes, Ramadan.
all of that. So communally, I think it's a beautiful thing to fast together as a community and then celebrate at the end with
Yeah,
heaps of food. And we've kind of lost that in today's society where food is available 24/7, and
you're
we kind
right.
of take food for granted. We don't even farm our own food. We just take it from the grocery. And so it's this thing that's always available. So because it's so available, it's not rare anymore. And it's something we take for granted. So now that I've fasted for 5 days,
Mm.
I really can't wait to just dig into a steak tonight.
Okay.
It
Well,
makes me
you know,
appreciate it so much more.
save it for tonight and just zone in. You're in the final stretch, so good
Like,
on
yeah,
you.
final stretch. Yeah.
You're in the final stretch. You know what? Speaking of that point, that's really you know quite important to highlight that we've got this overabundance of food and we've been disconnected from that touch, which you can, I guess, say is humanistic. Fasting is very much something that humans would have done unintentionally in the
Mm-hmm.
past.
Mm.
And reflecting back on the Carnivore Live, I don't know if you remember, we had the Q&A session on the Friday when we had a VIP dinner.
Mm.
And people were talking about, I think we're talking about farming and, overabundance of food. And then I yell out, well, we've got a lot of, we do have an overabundance of food, but also we've lost the skills and that connection to what we used to do, which was to hunt. And everyone started laughing. I'm like, no, I'm being serious. There's so much food out there. There's animals out there in the wild, which if you're thinking our farms are going to be affected, well, we've got game out here in the wilderness that are in the thousands. So you've got a surplus of obviously your junk food, your highly processed crap, but you've also got a lot of opportunities to eat really good meat, not just from the farming side of things, but from hunting as well. And but we just don't have the skills. And with the whole communal thing about fasting, religion is a thing that's sort of binding people together to you know experience these benefits of fasting. And you look at the if you've ever talked to someone who's been on a prolonged fast, let's say if they're on Ramadan, they feel amazing. Some of them, they look like younger versions of themselves. I don't know. It's just my observation.
Yeah, no, it very well may be. I mean, look how fast it's healing my fatty liver. I mean, it has
Yeah.
been confirmed. I as soon as I got the high blood test, I'm supposed to get like an ultrasound, but I've just put it off because I know I can heal it within a week. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm keen to get the blood work done again, and I'm really sure it will be low. But we'll wait and
I'm
see.
sure. And by the way, you do look really good. Your skin looks good. You don't look
Thank
gauntly
you.
at all. I think you look really
Oh,
good.
really?
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just staring at you from a screen right now. So yeah,
I was checking before this podcast. I was checking out my body in the mirror, and you can really tell
yeah,
my body has shrunk in the 5 days. Like not a lot, but it's a difference. I mean,
yeah.
because I don't know how true this is. I need to fact check it, but I think someone said you can lose up to like 7. I don't know how true it is. 7 kilos a day fasting or 7 pounds, but you lose so much weight. Got to fact check that one. But I know for me, like you can see all like the abs sticking out. I'm like, wow,
Abs.
this is great.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't be complaining about that. I'd be quite happy looking myself in the mirror and seeing the definition. Yeah,
It's usually not this prominent
yeah.
but yeah, I don't think it's 7 kilos. I think that's way too much. I think if I measured
Probably
myself,
7 pounds.
7 pounds. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, yeah. No, that's pretty cool. And going now into the whole fruits and Paul Saladino. I'm going to play devil's advocate here because Paul Saladino has helped so many people, and I know he gets a lot of flack in the carnivore community because he's gone rogue. He's added fruits, but for a lot of people who've just been scrolling through social media, if it wasn't for his posts where he's acting a bit crazy in the supermarket or telling people about cholesterol and the myths, I don't think a lot of people would have found the carnivore diet. So
I wouldn't have.
it's me too. Well, when I did carnivore, he was still carnivore at the time too. But a lot of people looked up to that, and that was the entry point for a lot of people. So I think he needs to be given credit for that. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of disagreements in how his viewpoints have changed, but I've also listened to, I don't know if it was recent, but he has told people like, look, if you feel great on carnivore, good on you. Keep doing what you're doing. But for some people who, this is what he's experienced, this is his anecdote, that's what he's sharing. So I think people overlook that and they look at this guy who's just promoting fruits. But I don't know. I guess, with your, I think what you've highlighted to me is that, you can experiment and see how things go.
That's exactly
and if
right.
it doesn't work out, you can always,
You can always reverse it.
well,
Go
that's
back
it.
on
And
carnivore, which is exactly what I've done.
and it shows exactly how resilient the human body is. All right. People have to realize that, for a lot of us who've been, who've gone through this journey, it wasn't an overnight thing that we had these problems. This was built over decades, and so the way I look at it is that 30, like I'm 33 right now. Pretty much 30 years of my life, I've endured crap. I'm pretty sure my body can handle a lot more. So yeah, don't be afraid to experiment is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, of course. And I know a lot of people don't eat fruit because they know, like I was talking to Dave Mack at the event last week, and he was saying to me, I just don't have fruit because I tend to binge eat. And if I
Yeah.
have fruit, I'll have so much fruit, and then it will just be too much. And that's kind of exactly what I did. So it's really hard to eat fruit in moderation because, of course,
Mm.
fruit, how it is today, wasn't how it was
No.
thousands of years ago. It's been hybridized and genetically modified to
Mm.
be so much more sugary and high fructose. Apparently, even 100 years ago, fruit used to be quite bitter, according to
Yeah.
Anthony Fiesi, who I was talking to. It was
Mm.
quite bitter and small and not that
Mm.
sugary. But now it's just been bred and hybridized to be like candy. So
Mm.
that's
Mm.
another thing to bear in mind. You're not really
Mm.
eating how nature intended the fruits to be. So that's why
Yeah.
I think if it really was how nature intended the fruits to be, like thousands of years ago, maybe it would be okay to have fruit occasionally. But the fact is, we're just not eating fruit how it was. It's just
No.
very sugary now.
Mm. 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 Especially where I'm here in Queensland, uh, every time I walk into supermarkets, I'm like, man, we've got a lot of fruits here, and it's here pretty much throughout the year. It's just mangoes.
Yeah.
It's I know it's not. There's obviously going to be off seasons, but you always see mangoes in the supermarket. But you're right. I think that is a very good thing to point out. Fruit isn't the same as what it was even 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And even have you been to the Philippines recently?
I'm going in August this year. I went last year in August and I went the year before. Growing up, I never used to go to the Philippines every year, but
Yeah.
just I think just recently I've had a really nice connection with family and just
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
there. And I think it's really nice to go back there in the winter here because I always bathe
Yes.
in the ocean and it's freezing. And so
Yes.
it's a nice what's the word, reprise, or just like time away from cold. And it's nice to just go there in the heart of winter just to have a quick break, and then I go back to diving in the ocean every second
Yeah.
day where it's freezing.
Absolutely. Um,
Reprieve is the word, sorry.
yeah. I don't know whether this is just my observation, but when I go back to the Philippines and I see the fruits compared to the fruits here, like I feel like
They're
there you
healthier.
could, well, yeah, you can see the I think so, the genetic modification. The fruits here are humongous.
Yeah.
The Bowen mangoes compared to the Philippine mangoes, yeah,
They're
there's a
they're
huge
tiny.
size
They're
difference.
tiny. And
Yeah,
even
yeah, yeah,
the chicken that I
yeah,
eat, like they're so
yeah,
small compared to the
yeah.
chicken here, which is like huge, injected with hormones. And so, I even eat rice in the Philippines, because not like
Yes.
Manila, but like in the third world country where my mum came from,
Yeah.
which is Surigao
Yeah.
del Sur in the lower half of
Yeah.
the Philippines. So even eat the rice and I feel fine.
Yeah. 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 I think. Look, this is just my opinion, and this is not an expert sort of
Mm.
take on it. But I think there is a genetic variance for a lot of people
Mm.
who lived in the equatorial region, especially if your ancestry,
Mm.
sort of
Was
remained
Filipino.
local.
Yeah.
Yeah, remained local for even thousands of years. You probably do have some, you know, adaptation to
Adaptation. I agree.
Mm. Even if it's a small amount, even if it's just a small amount. But yeah, look, the only way that you can, I guess, identify is to experiment.
Yeah.
Let go.
I know some people have said, when you live on the equator, there's so much more light from the sun. And so when it's summer and there's
Mm.
more light, you
Mm.
don't need to eat as much meat versus someone who is in like Scandinavia or somewhere where it's really cold and there's less light from the sun. You need to
Yeah.
have more meat because the light, like the energy, is stored in the cow. And so
Yeah.
that's why these, like a lot of Europeans, have the need to go on a carnivore diet and eat a lot of meat, whereas people on the equator tend to just have a lot of fruit and well, even vegetables, because Filipinos don't really eat so like as much red meat. It's more like lechon, which is like pig,
Yeah. Pork.
and
Yeah.
pork, or like just like fish, really, fish and fruit,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
pancit, noodles, and rice. But it varies because of the equatorial, the light content that you're getting at the equator.
Yes. yeah, it has a huge impact towards your agriculture, your wildlife, and yeah, just the environment in general. So, um, look, I just want to preface as well. Like, look,
Mm.
I've never been one to tell people that you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, and this is the way to do carnivore. At the end of the day, what I like to heavily promote, and I say this with good intent, you need to take control of your life and educate yourself. That is the most important thing, first and foremost, because no one likes to be told what to do.
Mm.
And if you feel like you're being told, this is how you do things, more likely you're not going to do it. And I think
Yeah, I
we've
agree.
learned that from the past. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
If I don't even bother trying to tell people what to do, because if someone's not ready to receive that information, they're just not
yeah,
going to listen. Like if someone
yeah,
has
yeah.
eczema and I say, you should try a carnivore diet, or if someone's overweight and I say, oh, like they said to me recently, like a friend said to me, oh, when I eat too much meat, I get heart palpitations. I said that could be
Mm.
an electrolyte issue. I mean,
Yeah,
people just
yeah.
aren't willing to listen unless they're looking. And that's
Mm,
why I share the reels and I share on my platform, because people
mm,
who find that are willing to listen and they're willing to
mm.
make the changes. You really can't get much benefit by just telling someone. I mean, like in the case of my gym instructor who told me the carnivore diet in the first place, I'm grateful he did. But it's not always the case that people are willing to listen.
But I
Yeah.
think if it piques their there's obviously going to be a huge bias when you receive something and you think, oh, this is for me or this is not.
Mm.
But when the message is sort of at your face saying, you need to do it this way, you need to do
Mm.
this, it's yeah, no one likes it. And I think what I really enjoyed about your talk, whilst I do have biases, what I liked about your approach to this diet is that you have taken control of
Mm.
what it is that you want to achieve, what it is that you want to strive for, and you've not let, and you've also humbled yourself and to say that I'm willing to learn as well, and that is another important thing. You've got to be a student and not a
Mm.
master all the time. And that's what I
Mm.
think. I might be getting into sticky waters here, but I think a lot of influencers on social media portray themselves as this, I'm the expert sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't get that vibe from you. I don't. That's
Well,
just me.
yeah, I consider myself a student of life. I've already completed
Yeah.
two degrees at university, but I'm planning on returning to biomedicine this year. I mean,
Nice.
I was already enrolled, and
Yeah.
at the time, I just wasn't sure if it was something for me,
Yeah.
so I had a leave of absence. But I'm willing to return to it now that I've
Mm.
like reinvigorated and re-enthralled myself with the carnival
Yeah.
community just with the event just past last week. That was
Yeah.
like a defibrillator to the heart of my passion. It was great being surrounded by so many carnivores. So I was like, wow,
Yeah.
it's just reignited
Absolutely.
that passion. So I'm really
Mm.
keen. I actually told Monash Uni if I can reinstate, and they're looking at
Nice.
it. So yeah, so
That's exciting.
that's exactly my point. Like I don't really consider myself an expert. All I can tell you is what I've done to
Yeah.
myself and what worked on myself. That's all I can give you. I can't help
Mm.
the people who come to me with, like all I can say, like if they have Crohn's disease, if they have cancer, if they've got atherosclerosis, all of these
Mm.
problems that they come to me with, all I can offer is what I've done, because I'm not a doctor. I'm a qualified mechanical engineer. I'm not a doctor. So that's why I don't pretend to be an expert.
Mm.
All I have is my story of what I've done. And if
Mm.
you can
Mm.
gain something from that, then I'm happy for you. But
Mm.
I can't, I'm not going to pretend to have knowledge that I don't have.
Mm.
But having
Mm.
said that, I'm always in pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of our speakers on last week was Anthony Fiesi, and he was saying, "How do you learn if your cup is always full? You have to have an
Full.
empty cup
Yes.
to be able to remain a student in life always."
Mm. I love
Like
that.
it didn't have to be an empty cup. Like you have some knowledge,
No.
obviously, but like
Yeah.
be willing to humble yourself and to empty your cup potentially for
Yeah.
the next teacher.
That's it. And
Yeah.
that lesson of humility is, I think, a big lesson that a lot of people
Mm.
need to incorporate. I think it is, yeah. But
Mm. At the same
mate,
token, like to offer like a caveat to that, if I was to say I'm wrong all the time, people would kind of start to question your credibility. So I get it. There's a balance
yeah,
of trying to. You can't. There's always a balance. I don't want to admit that like you don't want to admit that you're wrong, but you have to if you are wrong because yeah, it's such a fine line.
it
Um,
is. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely is. You know, when you but I guess it comes with the territory. If you know, you're coming from a place where you want to help people, you do need to have that
yeah.
level of expertise. I mean, not
Mm,
necessarily to be, oh, I know this, and you know, this is to be the fact,
mm,
but you know, just to get a point through that, you know, there are some things in this world that you do need to consider uh, as it impacts your health. So I think for the most part, a lot of us, regardless, well, we can sort of break this down into stages. Even the vegans and carnivores can come to this conclusion. Highly processed foods are not good for you. And I
mm,
think it's safe to say that. That is very
mm,
safe to say. And obviously, there's going to break down into nuances as the further down you go with whatever tribe or, you know, uh, your biases lean towards. But yes, you do need to have, I guess, that confidence in, you know, being able to tell people what is, you know, what you consider to be healthy, what you consider to be unhealthy. But at the end of the day, you know, they're open to form their own opinions on whatever they want to
mm.
do.
Well, that's
Um,
why I don't really
mm,
offer advice. I'm happy to not offer advice. I
yes.
just offer my story because
Yeah, me
my
too.
story is like that n=1 thing where
Yeah,
it's my story. I can show you what happened to me. I can show you what happens when you eat too much fruit, you know, and my story proves that. My liver
yeah,
being elevated in AST, ALT, my liver function becoming fatty liver, all of that from eating too much fruit. So this is what happened to me if you eat too much fruit. So use this now as uh, use this as a barometer for yourself
I
and
love that.
how you check your diet. You can use me as an example now.
That is awesome, man. I really love that. Uh, now, with that being said, let's go into the people that have influenced your life.
Mm.
I asked this with all my guests on the podcast. Who are your top three influencers on social media to date?
Well, I still respect Paul Saladino. I mean, like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know a lot of people give him hate. He has to be one of my top three. Because I owe it to him, of which I found the carnivore diet in the first place. If it wasn't for him and if it wasn't his book, The
Mm,
Carnivore Code, I wouldn't have been so enthralled. And I just
mm.
love his personality when he speaks and the way he presents himself and his kindness when he speaks. I mean, like I've got to know Professor Barkay personally, and I know he has a really kind heart. But from face value, when you kind of see his videos online, he's quite he's quite intimidating to.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I was even intimidated when I first met him, admitting that I ate fruit because I thought he was going to roast me.
Yeah.
Especially with my speech the first time round when I was
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of going against
yeah.
it. That's why I got Dr. Suresh up on my podcast
Yes.
because I didn't want to explain it myself. I'd rather a doctor, a person of qualification to explain
Yeah.
it because I knew he was in the audience. And he's very intimidating, but I think but he's a very nice guy. I sat next to
Very.
him on the bus and I think we actually get along. I actually got along with him more than all the other speakers. He was just a great guy to hang out with. He even invited me back to his farm, which was really
His
cool.
farm. Yeah.
Yeah. But Paul Saladino, I think he's just got a really inviting personality, and I relate to his story
Yes.
a lot. He had eczema. He suffered with
He
eczema,
did. Mm.
And so I actually think at the moment his pursuit of eating fruit, like he believes that he that's his story right now, and that's why he's speaking his truth, even though other people might not agree with him. For him, it's still okay, and so I think I don't think if he actually was in a situation where fruit was causing him issues and he just
Mm.
continued to say that fruit is good for me, then that would question his character. But at the moment, fruit, he's still thriving on fruit, and so he's telling a story that is true to him. So I don't
Mm. Yeah.
think he's a bad person, even though
No.
Professor Barquet says he can't stand him because he's constantly guzzling fruit down his mouth, and he's advocating to eat fruit when you shouldn't be. Even more than 5 grams of sugar in the bloodstream is considered toxic, and you're just
Mm.
spiking your GI, which is going to cause glycation, and you're going to induce insulin sensitivity and diabetes later on. So, I get it. So he's calling him immoral. The words Professor Barquet was using was Dunning-Kruger effect, where he
Dunning-Kruger
thinks,
effect. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
where he believes Paul Saladino is, he thinks he's smarter than he is. But I don't know. I just genuinely think that he's got the research and he's backed himself with research that, the sugar's wrapped up in the glucose. Sorry, the sugar's wrapped up in the
The
fiber, so
fiber.
the glucose is released slower. And there's a lot of evidence there for him that it works. I mean, I can say now that it's not working for me, but bear in mind, I was eating way too much fruit and not in moderation. So,
Mm.
it might be the case that it works for me if I just keep it in moderation to lower than 200 grams and not eat fruit every day, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what that will look like in the future. At the moment, I'm planning on just going back to carnivore. But my point is, I think Paul Saladino is an honest person, and just like me, he kind of admitted he was wrong after leaving the carnivore diet in pursuit of his truth now, which is an animal-based diet. So yeah, he's one of my top three for sure,
Mm.
Paul
Mm.
Saladino. And I think
Mm.
the other two I'll have to think about, probably because I'm a musician. I'd have to be one a musician as another one. I mean, I grew up listening to Billy Joel and Elton John. I don't know.
Nice.
I Filipino genes, everyone singing karaoke and singing. So that would have to be one of my other influences. But Paul Saladino is probably my top influencer right now.
Nice. Nice. Well, each to their own, and I've, you know, I think Paul Saladino, like I said, he's done a lot for introducing people into the carnivore community, or even just in this alternative space of, hey, let's not focus on eating processed crap and whatnot. So yeah, I think that is an awesome top choice. What about let's keep this a bit interesting. What are your top carnivore foods? I mean, there's not
Carnivore
really much to
food.
choose from. There's not really much to choose
Yeah,
from,
there's not much
really.
to choose from. I mean, like, I
Yeah,
love a ribeye steak. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I mean, if you were to say fruits, I would, I would have the time of my life going through all the fruits that I love. That's why it's so hard to cut the
To
fruits
give
out,
out,
because
yeah,
it's just like they're
yeah,
beautiful. Like Anthony Fiesi said, they're like candy because they've been genetically modified that way. But when I go back to the
yeah.
Philippines and all the fruits there haven't been genetically modified, they're still natural in the
Mm,
in the third world area. I'm just gonna go go crazy. I
yeah.
don't know. It'll only be for
It-
like a few weeks.
well, that's it. I mean, we're all human. I mean, like you said, there's an over surplus of food everywhere, and I think
Yeah.
no one's gonna be perfect. And this is something probably controversial, but I highly doubt that there are many people out there that are completely strict carnivore that live in these modern societies. Let's also mention that coffee is not
Carnival.
a carnivore food,
Yeah,
and I know a lot of people are drinking coffee.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think it lets I absolutely hate dogma. I hate it, and
Same.
I think we just need to come from a place where not you do you, and you talk your talk, and
Mm.
if you're not ready to back it up or confront people about it, then don't go on social media.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's it. That's it. But if you're open and honest about what it is that you do, and tell people that this is my experience. Hey,
Mm.
who are you to judge? Bloody hell, I'm gonna have a coffee after this. I don't care what people
Yeah.
say.
Oh, do you drink coffee?
Yeah, yeah, I still drink coffee.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but I've also never once claimed that I'm a full carnivore, and I
Yeah,
think it would
yeah.
be foolish to say that I'm going to remain carnivore for the rest of my life and
Mm.
just cut out everything completely because yeah, over surplus is the issue that we have, and mate, I have been in on this earth for 33 years, and for 30 years of my life, I have been eating a ton of crap. All right. I've got a
Mm.
lot of healing to do. But I can tell you that where my journey has taken me so far is that I've pretty much erased most of the foods out of my life that I used to eat, and I just stick to carnivore except for the coffee.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, I'm addicted.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm before this week. I'm still, like I'm not. I'm kind of separated from food at the moment, being on my fifth day of fasting. But
Yeah.
like prior to that, I'm definitely sugar addicted with
Yeah.
fruit.
Yeah.
And so, when
Mm.
people say, like you asking, what's my favorite carnivore food? I mean, like to me, I love meat. Meat is probably the best, but like
Mm.
nothing to me beats the beauty of fruit. That like, oh man, like a star apple is my favorite. I could just dig into that.
Really?
That's
A
like,
sour apple? Okay.
yeah, custard apple is just
Okay.
it just tastes like ice cream. I mean, I
It
mean,
does. Yeah, you're right.
isn't ice cream part of the carnivore diet if you eat like raw milk? I mean, like dairy is part of the carnivore diet. So who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll. I feel like there's, I don't know, there's a lot of galactose in that. Is there not? Like, there's a lot
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah.
comes from milk.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing. So surely,
Mm. Mm.
if people allow that, like, I know a lot of carnivores just eat a lot of cream. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Everything in moderation, I say, but it's just easy to
Yeah.
binge eat.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. It is. Yeah. I think binge eating as well, there is and this is another viewpoint that I don't know if a lot of people share, but it is a very it's a survival mechanism, isn't it? Because our ancestors
yeah.
in the past, imagine if they're going out for a hunt, hungry as, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna have a slice of this and then save it for later.
Yeah.
Hell no, I'm going in and I'm
Well, yeah.
eating. Yeah, yeah.
Because they
So
don't know when's the
this,
next time they're going to eat. So it's just like, holy
well,
crap, look at all this food. I'm going to eat it all. And then they stuff
yeah.
themselves. And then they don't know if they're going to eat for the next few weeks because, like, food's not guaranteed.
Well, and the other thing too is if I'm in a 5 day fast as a hunter gatherer, and I just happen to stumble across this berry bush,
Hmm.
I'm not gonna and I know that it's edible. I know that
Yeah.
this is food. Um, I am not going to miss out on this opportunity, and I think this is where we have to look at humans as being opportunistic. We're
Yeah.
not. Yes, we are carnivores. Yes, I do 100% agree that we are hyper carnivores. We thrive on eating meat, but you can't tell me that we didn't walk past the berry bush and say, "Yeah, no, I'm gonna skip that and just
Yeah.
fast for another five
Imagine
days."
the ancestors are like, nah, I'm carnivore. I'm not eating that.
Yeah,
Like
no,
they
no,
probably
no,
most
no.
definitely, even the Inuit tribes, they have like sometimes
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
seasonally in the summer, there's some berries growing, and so they eat that. But again, as I said before, the problem is all of the food's been hybridized, and so we have to keep
Yeah,
that in
yeah.
mind. Where like
Absolutely.
I think Dr. Anthony Shafee, or maybe it was Paul Saladino, he said if you think about plants, 90% of the plants you look at if you're living in the wild are toxic. So
Mm.
it's like naturally, what are you going to do if you start hunt? Like if you're living in the wild, you're going to hunt. You're going to eat meat.
Yeah, huh? Yes.
So obviously, the problem is all of the food that's available to us now. We've created methods where carrots was used to be inedible. They modified it in a way that we
Mm.
can eat it now. Same with beans. Like some beans, if you don't cook it properly, you can die uh,
Yeah.
because they're so toxic. I mean, ricin, which is uh, a poison,
Mm.
is made from beans, and so there's all these different. legumes and all these different classes of fruits that have been hybridized so that we can eat them, and that
Mm.
wasn't available to us in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
So we have to just keep in mind that humans are opportunistic, but the world we're living in is artificial.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have to
Yeah.
really be selective now.
Yeah, and that's how we've got to change our mindsets. But yeah, no, I guess where I was going at was, people blame themselves for, I'm addicted. They blame addiction
Mm.
on
When it's
them
natural.
personally,
Yeah.
when it is, because yeah, it is it's an opportunistic way to survive in the past. But now, yeah, we've got different issues to really consider. But yeah, just some food for thought for people.
Mm, mm.
Um, Bradley, we're here at the hour mark now, and I think we'll cap it off. I think this was a wonderful open conversation, and I just want to thank you again so much
Of
for
course. Thank
you
you.
know yeah. Now, what is the future for Bradley Marshall from here? We know that your diet might change, but in terms of where are you right now in, I guess social media, if you want to share it that way.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I've
yeah,
actually had a break from social media for the past year. Like, I haven't really posted something properly since April last year.
yeah,
And that's just because there was just a lot going on
yeah,
uh, in my life and
mm,
working out where I wanted to be. I've had eczema my whole life, so I haven't really had the opportunity to live a life that was free of eczema. So
mm,
part of the year was just spent just living and enjoying myself. And of course, there was a lot of, I'm a perfectionist as well, so I'm always aware that I want to have the content really engaging, and so I spend a lot of
yes,
time. Like the reel I just posted today, like I spent at least a half a day on it just to make sure it's edited nicely, that there's a thumbnail, and the thumbnail
mm,
is like kind of engaging and all ready to reach as much followers as I can. And so it's very taxing, and
mm,
especially if there's people showing me like they're reaching out saying, I've got Crohn's disease, I've got cancer, can you please help me? And you can feel very overwhelmed very quickly when you feel like you don't have the knowledge. But that's why I remind myself now that it doesn't matter that I don't have the knowledge. It's because, and I'm willing to gain that knowledge. Like that's part of my journey in the future, is to gain as much knowledge as I can. I'll do as much research as I can. But at the moment, I like not console, but I remind myself that it's okay to have not to have the knowledge that I want in the future right now, because all I'm offering right now is my story, and they can use my story as a barometer to help themselves.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
so that's what I'm doing now. I'm planning on going back to biomedicine soon. I'm planning on just growing my page as much as I can. I'm planning on trying to incorporate some of my music stuff onto my main page, just because, like I'm going to keep it mostly carnivore, but maybe 3 posts to every one post is music, because
Yeah,
I've always wanted to be a musician all my life. And I've got 2 songs that I want to release. So I want to kind of drop that in the carnivore page and see where people react. And if they like it, they can follow my music and support me on Spotify and all that. And hopefully I can have like a dual kind of lifestyle as an influencer, speaking truth in carnivore and helping people, while at the same time having a bit of a music career.
wow, wow, that is so cool. That is a dream. Um,
That's my dream.
that is an awesome dream, mate. I share it with you. I've actually wanted to be a musician since, yeah, I'm Filipino, so this is
Yeah, of course.
a very a very I wouldn't say genetic thing, but it is a very cultural thing to
To want to
be.
be. And I feel like a lot of Filipino
Yeah,
parents are very, they encourage people to sing, but it's just for
yeah,
recreation. They would never
yeah.
in their wildest dreams encourage it as an actual career path. So that's why, in high school, I always struggled choosing between music and science, because my mother, who's Filipino, was always say, it's not practical to be a musician. You have to study something, a real job. So that's why I did engineering
Nursing.
at the start. Yeah, nursing. I mean, there's all my cousins who are Filipino are all nurses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's funny. Well, look, Brad, thanks so much for your time again. People can find you on Your social media. All right, let's tell
social
your
media.
social media. Yeah, where can they
Yeah,
find you,
so
man?
so you can find me like my main place where I took off is Instagram. That's Bradley Marshall Official. But I've also got a Facebook page, same name, TikTok, same name, and on YouTube, same name. So you can find me on all of the apps.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you all for watching this episode of Steaks with Mates. And thank you again, Bradley.
Thank
Uh,
you.
please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to both our social media accounts. But until then, we'll see you next time.
Awesome.
See ya.
See ya. Thank you.